as you know. Henry Ford built more and more efficient. I knew it's been good. Right into it? Can anybody not hear me?
Everybody can hear him?
Okay. So, anyway, Henry Ford was obsessed with vertical integration. He wanted to build the entire car from the ore to the rubber to every part of the engine. And he worked diligently to build more and more efficient plants from Mack Avenue to Piquette to Highland Park. And in 1915, he bought 1,100 acres on the Rouge River, and he was going to make his ultimate plant, eventually the Rouge plant. It started out with building boats for World War I, the Eagle boats. You can see, let's see if I can make this pointer work. Okay. This is a postcard taken about the time they started to construct the Benson and the Henry, 1924. Let's see if I can find, oh, look at that. Here. Over here is the B building, where they started to build the Eagle boats. They built a large number of them, but then the war ended and they terminated the contract. The steel mill was in operation, and they originally started building steel for engine blocks and various other parts for shipping over to, it's not working? You're coming back.
No, I'm coming back.
No. Well, that was easy.
Then some of them back want to sit up front, so.
Yeah, anyway.
We're set now. Sorry, I got everybody a chair.
They would make the steel at the Rouge and then make the cars at Highland Park. No Model Ts were ever built at the Rouge. That really started with some Fords and tractors and then into the Model A's. But as Ford consolidated and moved more and more equipment to the Rouge, it got bigger and bigger and bigger. During World War I, to facilitate the movement of the Eagle boats, the Corps of Engineers built a turning basin, straightened out the river around Fordson Island, and built a shortcut canal around the bottom end of what became Sug Island. This greatly helped the Rouge plant because you could get a ship up there now. The first ship to come up through the Rouge to unload was the Cleta Schneider. So let's go to the next one. Oops, that's the other one. You saw it. I'll get it. Take a few hours. Here are the Eagle boats getting ready to go. They built around 50, some of them, and this is looking down towards the Detroit River. They were kind of ugly looking things and a little top heavy, but they built them fast, and a couple of them lasted into World War II. So that's how he started, and he perfected his speeding up of everything and building all the parts. This is what he was aiming for. The ore comes in at the top left on the ship, gets turned into steel, made into, in this case, engine blocks and various things, sent to Highland Park, and by Wednesday noon, the stuff is now a car. He's basically made something before he's probably even paid for the dirt that he brought down from the Upper Peninsula. And this is what he was really obsessed with, because he could cut the price of the cars and increase his profit and make a really better car. The Model Ts were excellent cars for the time. In fact, they were so good that he didn't think anybody needed anything else ever. And in a way, you could probably still use one for an awful lot of things in an awful lot of places. Here you see Henry and Benson with the grandparents at about the time they were building the Henry and the Benson Ford. Here they are at about the time they were launching the two ships. Henry's the one on the left. He's a little bit older. When they were going to university school, which eventually merged into University Liggett. And they had a lot of interesting field trips for the kids at the school on the various ships. Here we see. Here's the Henry about to be launched in Lorraine. There's stories that he was using one shipyard against the other to get the lowest price, but that's a story you hear a lot. I don't know if it's true or not, but the Henry was launched a little bit before the Benson, but the Benson went into service quicker because there was a tornado that tore through Lorraine and bounced a few things around in the shipyard, delayed the Henry leaving. Henry was 6'11" feet long, 62 feet wide, and the Benson was 6'12" feet long, 62 feet wide. There you see the celebration in the Ford News of launching the new Lake Leviathan, the Henry. And big news, because these are the first heavy diesel-powered bulk carriers on the Great Lakes. There were some other smaller canaler-type boats and oddball tugs and things that were diesel. But this is a whole new class of vessel. Here you see the Benson going in at the Great Lakes Engineering Works.
That's actually the moment of the launch.
The moment of the launch, yeah. She's actually rebounding. So they would launch them, a side launch in the Great Lakes. It's very popular. There's a newspaper clipping from the same time. Young Benson actually used an electric control to launch the ship. Something to play with in his room. Press the button. It wants a ship. But these were beautifully outfitted, both of them with passenger cabins. And Henry spared no expense on these ships. But he was, of course, also interested in efficiency. And he wanted his own shipping line to supply his own steel mill with his own ore from his own iron ore mines and his own coal mines. And of course he had a rubber plant, and he had Benzol, and he had a glass plant, and today he'd be building computer chips at his plant. We wouldn't have any problems with foreign computer chips.
Yeah.
But we need him to come back. So anyway, the Ford boats were always beautifully maintained. They were always painted every year perfectly, and then when the Fords got on them, they would paint them again. It was interesting, even after they retired the McNamara. First thing they did after they retired the McNamara, they towed her across the slip to the layup slip, and they painted the whole ship. She never sailed again, but she looked good. And that was the Ford way. Here's a model of the Benson that was built by the Henry Ford Vocational School. There's one in Dawson's for years at a Henry. They're actually pretty nice little models, and I actually think they operate. I think there's an electric motor in there, not a little diesel, but Henry would probably prefer them. Here we see the Detroit Institute of Arts, the Diego Rivera murals of Ford plants and Ford workers, and he did not forget the Henry and the Benson over the door there. I think it's facing Woodward. You can see them over the door. There's a little, there we are, closer shot.
Oh.
The two of them going along.
Oh my gosh.
And you can see the skull in the face up there. It's like
And the rum runners in the front.
rum runners in the front.
Yeah, that's right.
And the fish.
Yeah.
You had fish trying to get out of the river. But of course, one of the ships got the safety award, the other one didn't. The one with the skull did not get the safety award. It's actually, it's similar to what the ships actually look like. This is an early shot, I believe, of the Benson at the Rouge. They started out with Hewletts at the Rouge, little tiny Hewletts. You can see there are two of them by the bow of the Benson. This is an early season shot because the Henry is across the slip at the fit-out dock. Apparently, those Hewletts did not work well, and they replaced them with those larger machines later on, which did a lot of damage to cargo holds. But the Hewletts were very small, and one of them was knocked over by some ship. I haven't figured out which one yet. This is a shot of the Ford plant in full business tire. You can see the different materials in the dock. There's coal down at the end. There's iron ore brought in by a foreign ship there behind the Henry and the Benson. Then you have the stone, the coal, and the stone is up at the far end of the dock. You can see all the way out to the Detroit River. That was all straightened out, and eventually Ford wanted to put all the bridges into tunnels. There would be 3 road tunnels and 3 railroad tunnels, but he couldn't get that done. Would have been nice, but he couldn't quite get that done. And this is another shot. You can see that that's the McNamara laid up on the other side of the slip. This isn't the greatest shot, and Mike didn't really want me to have it, but it reminded me of how the air was
quality of that.
back in the early 70s.
Yeah.
When you went into the Rouge plant in the early 70s, you could see the little flakes in the air. It was like that all over industrial Detroit. It was bad. People complain about things now, they don't know anything.
Right.
You know? But this is back then that was prosperity. People were feeding their families, buying their houses, and having a life.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, before the EPA. This is an interesting shot during the war of the amphibious jeeps. Ford built a number of them, and they were doing a publicity shot here at fit out with the Benson and the Henry. They were actually, these things are worth a lot of money now. They're quite rare. 6 figures? How many do you have? Not enough.
I have a wife who's.
You have a wife
She's
that's
not
worth,
understanding enough.
the wife is worth 7.
That's right, she's worth more. That's right.
Here's more of them. Here are the blast furnaces. There was a Henry and a Benson blast furnace, and each of them lit their own furnace. How many kids remember that when you were small, lighting off your first blast furnace? Those are the days, right, man? Here you see the Benson's builder's plate, hull number 245, Great Lakes Engineering Works. It was interesting, I got the sale on 245 at 244. This was on the, right under the stack on the after end.
You couldn't quite get away with it.
I couldn't do that. I had it in my room. I had to take it off when we painted the cabins. We had Benson Ford come on for a trip, and 2 weeks before, we painted the entire boat, including the bilge. I took up the gratings. I was a wiper in 71 on there. I took up the gratings, 4-story high gratings. I had them up, and I was wire brushing these things. Because, of course, Mr. Ford wanted to see the bilge and the gratings.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, what else do you write a boat for? And I had that in my room because they spray painted the after cabins. And I didn't want them to paint it white. But it went back out there. So anyway, Mr. Ford came on the gangway, went through the engine room, said hello to everybody, went to the passenger cabins. We never saw him again. But boy, the boat looked good. Now this is the main feature of these two ships. This is the secret sauce. These were Sun Doxford, opposed piston, 2-cycle diesels. They were 4 stories tall. They had no heads, an upper and a lower piston rod. They had 91-inch stroke between the two cylinders, the two pistons. They were concave inside. They formed a Hemi head when they came together. This is 1924. There were 4 levels for an oiler to run up and down, filling different lubricators and checking different things. They were controlled by that control stand on the bottom. The real engines, you could not see the rods and the crankshaft because they had portholes over the bottom end, but they were lit inside. You could look inside the lit engine crankcase and see the thing rolling over. They were amazing ships to work on. They were very quiet when you were on board them. They were started with direct air, and being 2-cycle, they were scavenged with a huge amount of air pumped into 2 pounds per square inch. So they had like a 15-foot exhaust muffler in the stack. And when you were off the ship and they were going by you, they would make the sound, making money, making money. On board the ships, you could not hear that. But they would blow smoke rings, and we could watch them blow smoke rings all day long. And of course, on Ford boats, you never had smoke. You had efficiency haze. Oh, yes. Here you see Henry and Benson, just playing boat captain. You know, what should we do today? Let's go and play. Here's coming through the Dick Street Bridge, built by J.C. Morse. You can see a power plant in the background. Coming through the Dick Street Bridge, the other Ford boat. This is a Henry, I believe. The Benson's unloading at the corner there. And that was the coal area, I believe, in the corner. Ford went through a prodigious amount of coal every day. We had a hard time keeping it in the plant. Here we are upbound on the Henry in '72, going through the new pole lock. This is a time when I became an oiler on the Henry in '72. And And it was fun to watch this thing run.
Why would you ever want to go back to college?
Maybe I didn't. But here's an interesting shot of the Henry in like 1939. They were still using one of the Hewletts there, one of the little Hewletts. And I believe there's an appliance there behind decks 1 and 2. There's a brown thing on deck. I think that was some sort of hoisting thing for Mr. and Mrs. Ford, who were very frail in the late 30s. And they had some way of lifting them on the ship when they would go on their trips. And of course, the Henry Ford was Henry Ford's private yacht. That was his boat. He and Claire would go on yearly trips on it, and they would go, they'd go to Duluth, and they would anchor in the harbor, go ashore, go shopping, visit friends, get on the ship, and sail back to Dearborn. They wouldn't pick up any cargo, they'd just go back to Dearborn. There is a story about Henry going up to the Big Bay Club west of Marquette and telling the captain, run the ship up on the beach by the club. And the captain, yes sir. So he pumped her out, eased it onto the beach, found a good spot. Henry went up, they put a ladder over, and he hollered down to the guys want to go for a boat ride? And a number of the people got on, and they went around Lake Superior for a couple days. They came back, everybody got off, thanked Henry. They went to Marquette and loaded ore for Dearborn. A reporter talked to the captain, and the captain said, when the guy owns the company, you do what you're told. This is the galley. These were on the Henry when it was new. Guest bathroom. Thank you. Guess what the next one is. This is a forward passenger dining room.
Can you tell I helped him put the PowerPoint together?
Yes, he
Sorry
helped.
about that.
He gets the blame, he gets the kudos. This is on the Henry. The interior of the Benson was different. She was a different ship, different yard. I actually preferred her decoration, just me. There's nothing wrong with the Henry, it was just a little different, I liked it better. Benson had a silver chandelier in this room. This is the observation room, where you could observe. You can see there's a stairway that goes down to the deck below in the center with an arch, a wooden arch. This is that arch today. Some of the carved woodwork. Did a lot of good things in Lorraine.
Who's that?
Here I am, 1972. I haven't changed a bit, except I lost my sight. This is the stack on the Henry. She had a different shaped stack than the Benson. Benson had an oval stack. But this is my oiling outfit. No hard hats, you know. It was interesting. This is the upper deck on the Benson. It's a little blurred, but you can see the upper part of the cylinders with the machinery guards on them. Henry did not believe in anybody polishing brass. Every piece of brass on the boat was nickel plated. And over the years, they took more and more pieces off during the winter to nickel plate more things. They also had machinery guards, which you see over the tops of these cylinders, with nickel edging, but the middle part was blued steel. So one thing is, when I was a wiper on the Benson, I would have to oil the blued steel. So there was something to do. But he was very adamant about nickel plating. And a lot of times when you find something off a Ford boat, it's nickel plated. Like, there was a gauge here earlier, a gauge back there.
Yeah, the things on the
silver,
table.
yeah. But anyway, this is the upper deck. This would be about the main deck on the ship. It's slightly above the spar deck. So it went up a long ways. This is the control center. They were direct drive. There was no gearbox. You stopped it and reversed it, and it would start there, and they would kick it over. They also had a brake on them. They would stop them so that it didn't roll over too much, because you had to back them up fast. It would stop the engine so it didn't roll on by itself. Beautifully engineered things. The crankshafts were built at the Skoda Works in Czechoslovakia. These ships were built for the ages. The engines lasted the entire life of the ship, and there was never a real problem with them failing or wearing out, as long as you maintained them. This is a cam deck. As an oiler, I would go around to the cam deck and make sure these cams, they had oil in their reservoirs. The covers are off for maintenance here in this picture. But you can see the liners in the center, and the big round thing is the exhaust. There was a scavenging port there where the air would blow the exhaust out because they were two-cycled. It's a shot of the cam deck put together with the upper part. You can see the blowers behind. It had regular blowers for air start. It had a higher pressure. Then they had the scavenging blowers that put a lot of air through. There are thousands of cubic feet at 2 pounds. That's all you needed is a lot of volume. Beautiful machines. And those are some of the gratings that I picked up and oiled on the Benson. But that's looking up towards the upper shot that I had at the top of this engine. Here's a diagram of the engine, fore and aft. Now the upper part, the upper cylinder was suspended by a sort of a yoke, piston rod, like a double piston rod that connected with the crankshaft all the way down. And then the lower one was connected by a single. It was interesting because one set of rods were in compression, the other one were in suspension. So there was very little pounding or wear on the crankshaft. They were basically floating. Amazing engineering for 1924. You can see the exhaust there. You can actually see the scavenging port. That section halfway up with the holes across it. That's where the air went through to evacuate the cylinder. Amazing engines. This is how they're positioned in the boat. From Marine Review in 1924, you can see the 4 cylinders with eight pistons, direct drive, no gearbox, and the upper section there was an electric steering gear. When I was on the Benson, I was painting above the steering gear. We were going under the Port Huron Bridge, making a left turn into Lake Huron, and the engineer came by and shut off there were 2 different engines. He shut off the one engine and did not start up the other steering engine. So we started to head for Fort Gratiot Light. Fortunately, the chief watched during the rivers, and he went right up there and switched on the other one, and we didn't miss a beat. But he took the engineer back like a little child, held his hand, and showed him what he did wrong. This is part of the engine room.
Sliding down.
Yes. Yes, what we would do to get down faster when I was oiling, you would put your feet up on the railings and you would slide all the way down. You could get down in about 8 seconds. But sometimes a jokester would put oil on one railing. And you would flip over and everybody laughed except the poor guy here's the crankshaft with the piston rods. This was inside the engine. You could see through the portholes. They had lights on inside. You could look inside. Imagine your car if you could just sort of look in the crankcase to see how things were going. They ran at about 85 RPM, did about 14.5 miles an hour. They didn't really go much slower or faster, lighter loaded. They just went along. This is an ad from the early 30s, Motor Ship Magazine from Sons Oxford. They were known for these engines, and they were very popular in a lot of saltwater things. And they only recently got rid of the last one on the Canadian side. They built one, the Canadian ambassador had one of the last Oxfords. And there may be a few kicking around somewhere right now. Here's another thing. The Henry, when I got over there, she still had her original 1924 Worthington semi-diesel generators. This is one of them. It put out 450 horse, 300 kW. And we one time, how to start them, they weren't quite diesels. So to start them, you had to open the top of each cylinder. You would get a wick that looked like a piece of chalk and light it. Stick it in the cylinder, crank down the gripper. And of course, you had already barred the engine over with that 6-foot flywheel with a big steel bar. Blew it over with air. Then you lit these things off and you kicked it over with air and it would run. And it would produce all that horsepower. now, I don't know if it could actually lift itself because it was so huge and heavy. We lost the plant going by the Boblo dock in the lower river. I had to start one of these up, and we got it started. The emergency lighting system on the Henry, she still had her 1936 Ford Bullet headlights for the emergency lights. That's what they used. And they called Worthington for spare parts. They stopped building these things slightly right after the boats were built. Worthington said, well, we can't get parts for the Model T at the Ford dealer, so don't expect a lot from us. The Benson had two 398 cats in it, and they eventually replaced these when she was converted to the Sulfan motor. I sailed on the last year, the Henry sailed as a straight decker. The next year she went in to become a Sulfan motor. And they redid a lot of things, including take out some of the passenger cabin. Here's an early shot of the Henry. This is a Captain Taylor photo. I believe it's in Lake St. Clair. You can see she has her original tall stack. And she originally had a whistle light on the forward mast with light bulbs. When you blew the horn, it lit up the letter F. When they were built, they had light up Ford signs on the stack, but those didn't last too long. But here she is going along. They had teak wood doors and teak railings on the Henry. Here you see her threading the needle. I think that's Canadian Progress in the Avondale. And you can see she's flying her house flag, Bluebird of Happiness. That was Henry Ford, that was his personal flag. When he was on the ship, that was flown. After he passed away, it became the fleet flag until the company went away, the fleet went away. It's not the same flag. They were great bird watchers. Clara and Henry loved birds. Ford carried all this coal. A lot of it came from Toledo. And this is one of the new coal rigs that was built in the 50s by the Krupp Works in Germany, and appropriately named the Sputnik because, of course, it's Krupp Works in Germany, and they couldn't figure out what to call it. But this rig would lift 2 cars at a time, flip them over, 200-ton hoppers, dump the coal onto a conveyor belt, which would then go out to the boat, and they would load in a chute, which you'll see in a minute. What's wrong? It's dead. There it goes. Okay, this is the chute getting into position. The railroad and steamship executives excitedly watching it. If they actually did anything, it would go right in their faces there. But this is quite a thing. It was a fast loader. And there was always a Ford boat, it seems, in Toledo loading coal. They used so much of it. If you were coming down with ore, you unloaded the ore, went down, got a load of coal, unloaded that, then you went back up for more ore, and there was somebody going down. This is another rig there in Toledo. This is at C&O. They had this car pusher that would bring the cars up an inclined railroad, and then they would have another pusher come out of a trench in the middle and push the car up into this machine that would lift the car up in the air and flip it upside down onto the pan. Here you see it going up in the air. It would lift the whole car, tip it upside down, drop the coal in the pan, and then they would load it into the boat. You can see we have a good deck load of coal here. We usually never closed our hatches when we loaded coal because we could stack it 6 feet high. It's only going from Toledo. We'd probably make it. Then the next car coming up would bump into this car, knock it into a inclined railroad. It would go through a spring switch and then come back and go out in the yard. Every now and then one of the cars was a little too well lubricated, and a couple of them I saw would go off the end. A couple of times they landed on some guy's car parked under the end of the railroad. So be careful. Here you see we're loading here at the lakefront. I'm watching the Henry wait for I think the Frank Purnell here is loading. There's a Steiny boat on the other side. There were docks after docks after docks, and they were all full all the time. A lot of times you couldn't even get a line on the dock because there was so much traffic in there. It's a lot different now.
Where was that?
It's Toledo. But at the same time, Toledo was doing this. They were doing this in Sandusky. They were doing this in Cleveland. They did it in Conneaut. They did it in Ashtabula. They moved a lot of coal. And they were loading in South Chicago, too. So there was a lot of coal moving in those days. Here you see we're coming in to the coal dock at night, looking for a place to tie up. That's the Benson over there loading. There's a Bowen boat on the other side, self-loader. Canadian waiting to get in, and there's another guy ahead. So we are looking for a place to tie up. That's how it used to be. Here we are loading at Sputnik on the Benson Ford. That's the Toledo bumboat there tied up alongside, the Dewey's Toledo bumboat. When you were on the ship, you were not in port very long, and you were in port at bad times of the day or night. Usually many miles from any place where there was a store. So these bumboats would tie up, you would go down the ladder, it was usually air conditioned, you could have a beer, buy some cigarettes, magazines, work gloves, sometimes a TV, whatever you wanted. You're looking at me, Mike, but I'm not
The
going to
mayor of
say.
Toledo. That's,
But this boat had gambling on it. Some people lose their whole paychecks. You get a six-pack of beer, carton of cigarettes, you go home happy. There was never a problem because the guy that owned the boat was the mayor of Toledo. Yeah. You can see my my room on the Benson, if I can find the little pointer thing. Yeah, I did find it there. It's right up on the after end, just around the corner from the emergency steering wheel, there's a little door. That's where I was, right in there. Wasn't a bad place to ride. This is our deck cargo coming up to the Rouge. Occasionally there were outside trips. This is the Henry or the Benson, I'm not sure which. It's an old picture of them unloading grain in Buffalo. It didn't happen often, but it did happen. And I know when I was on the Benson, we went to Cleveland, we went to J&L in Cleveland, we were unloaded by the steam rigs. We went to Hannah-Furnace a few times in Lackawanna. We went to South Chicago to load coal for Dearborn. Coming into South Chicago, I was down painting on the Benson, and the chief came down and said, you know, you've never been to South Chicago. You should stop painting now and go up and sit on the hatch and watch the scenery go by, just for a couple hours. Okay, chief, I'll do it for you. Nice place to work. Yeah. Here we are back in the pilot house of the Henry, back when it was new. Everything shined. This is the way down to the captain's cabin. I know somebody that has pieces of that. He's pointing them out now. The plan on the desk was the radio direction plan.
all that railing's in my basement,
Yeah.
both the metal and the wood.
Before radar, there was a radio direction plan. There's the captain with his happy Chadburn.
How long was he captain? Is he long?
When you got a job with Ford, you stayed there.
Was that-
When you got a job with Ford, you stayed there, because it usually was about the best job you were ever going to get as a captain or an engineer. However, if you made any mistakes, you were gone. There was a captain on a tug who fell asleep in the harbor, just tied up. Somebody found him, and they fired him and sold the tug.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so this is the Ford, the Henry was one of the first ships with a bow thruster in the early 60s. Her and the Crapo were, I think, one of the first ones. This is the installation in the pilot house for all the gauges. It was run by about 550 horse Cummins diesel. They cut a hole in the bow and put a tunnel across the bow with a propeller in the middle that would push the ship one way or the other, kind of like a tugboat. This is the control. You push it left or right, and the ship would go left or right in the front. The bow would move. It's quite a nice thing. Here it is in the shipyard getting its tunnel installed. Those little things down at the bottom are painted in red lead of the new tunnel that it's getting. It's very handy to have. This is a shot of the tunnel.
Over 5 foot in diameter, right? You can stand in that.
Yeah. In fact, I took a picture of Marilyn, who couldn't make it tonight.
His wife.
I took a picture of her in the bow thruster tunnel in Cleveland on Buffalo. She went in there and posted the picture. It'll be a nice keepsake. This is the Cummins that was running that. They eventually got bigger and bigger engines. After you got to a certain horsepower, you had to have an engineer on watch in the bow thruster room, so they were kind of limited by what the Coast Guard would permit. Here's one of the buckets. This is one of the big buckets. This is a cleanup bucket. and it would open extra wide to clean up the ore. And you can see some of the damage done to the tank tops, the side tanks, and everything else. Some of these operators were not terribly worried about damage. And they did a lot more to the combings too. Did a lot of damage to the combings. This is an early shot of one of the Hewletts. You can see how tiny that Hewlett is next to that Fordson tractor. The guy was pushing the ore up, doing the cleanup, because they were probably going down for coal.
So that rod on there, they'd lower that,
They'd lower that down.
the Fordson tractor, then the operator
Yeah,
would go down and
they
push that.
take
Yeah.
the Hewlett, leave it open like that, put it over the tractor and hook it up to the chains and lift it up. Here's the Benson unloading stone at the end of the dock. I could take pictures if I was careful, because if you got caught by security, you were in trouble.
Why?
Because they were security, and you were in trouble. They would not let me take my camera through the gate. I had to have it shipped to me on the Westcots,
On the mailboat.
on the mailboat. Yeah. But I made up for it. I took pictures of every darn thing I could. Here you see us, doing the stone. Those are 20-ton buckets. These things are big and wide and easy to damage the boat. These are the second rigs they used, and you can see the Henrys behind us at the other side of the dock. Here's the bucket.
That's limestone?
That's limestone. Here they are. This is before our visit, because after the visit, he would have painted those combings. Those combings are disgusting.
Was this all to make steel?
Yes. Yes.
Where do you get a little limestone, right?
Calcite. Calcite, we did one Cedarville.
Roger City, right? Yeah, outside Roger City.
Yeah. But Ford had, as I found out today from a well-known source, Ford had connections with Michigan Limestone. He was a buddy of Carnegie Bradley. And apparently, that's why I was always wondering why Ford didn't own his own quarry somewhere. Apparently, Calcite took very good care of Ford. So anyway, here's the Benson, the beautiful stern. She's just about unloaded there. Here we are coming in on the Henry, passing the Benson. The practice was when you came in and the boat was unloading, they stopped unloading, put the rigs in the upright position, because something very bad happened once. Namely, they knocked over a rig. So you did not want that to happen. So there was also, you could see there's a little front loader there by the stern of the Benson down in the corner. It's a little tractor. There are much bigger front loaders there, great big cats. And there was a phone down on the dock, right near the stern where you'd all make calls. Back in those days, you used phone booths. And this phone was terrible. It would take your money and it wouldn't call, and it was terrible. This guy came with a big cat and was trying to call home, and he got so frustrated. He backed the Caterpillar up, picked the phone booth up in the bucket, and dumped it in the Rouge. He was a UAW guy, he couldn't touch him. That was a good thing to do. Here's one of the ladders. This is one of the newer ships, actually. You had to be very careful with the ladders because those rigs would move, and they did not look or watch or care what was going down onto the dock. They would take out the bottom of the ladder very quickly. Here we are going through the Jefferson Avenue Bridge. This is when I was on the Benson. When I was on the Benson, I used to love to go up forward, take boat pictures, sit in the forward recreation room, watch TV, visit. But the mate, this was one of these ships where there was an after end crew and a forward end crew. You sat at the after end side of the mess table. You did not sit at the forward end side if you worked in the after end. And the mate came and told me, I don't want you ahead of hatch 18. You stay back aft. Sir, yes, sir. So, Ford was one of the pioneering companies that treated human sewage into holding tanks. They had chemical toilets that fitted all their ships with holding tanks. They would pump out every time they came to the sewer. And being the low man on the totem pole, the wiper, guess who recharged all those chemical toilets at the forward end? but I never went ahead of hatch 18 after they told me. So I mentioned to the chief, I said, Chief, he told me. Chief said, just stay here until he wants you. Eventually, I was welcomed back for the rest of the season
Does it smell?
because of the smell. Yeah. But Ford was very pioneering in that. They did that before a lot of people. They also did some other things that we wouldn't do now. They wanted to throw away a piston. I don't know why. It was worn out, and they wanted to get rid of it on the Benson. And what they did, they opened the gangway door up in Lake Huron. They put some big planks out. They got the piston, which was 24-inch diameter, about this tall. They put it on the planks and crept it out towards the edge of the boat. And they put something heavy on the other end of the plank, namely me. I balanced that piston. And they crept it out and crept it out until I was just sort of teetering. And then they called the pilot house and said, give her hard over, we're going to push her off now. And so they gave it hard over, and they said, Greg, step off the planks. I stepped off the planks, the planks went up against the overhead, piston went over, and hit the propeller on the way down. Oh. That's environmental
And
justice.
Henry Ford would have melted that down.
Henry Ford would have kept that, and yeah, he would have kept that. That's terrible, but that's the way things were done. And yet Ford was still one of the better companies. So, anyway, here we are going through Jefferson Street. Emergency wheel, you see that? It was ready to go, but we never had to use it. There are a lot of stories about ships that had to use it. Now, this is calcite, where we would go often to load. We took, on the Benson Ford, we took the retired head of Ford of England up for a trip. And he was really an old guy, a nice fellow. But he wanted to go golfing. There was a nice golf course near Rogers City. He went up there, and while golfing, he died of a heart attack, which was unfortunate. But our captain was so relieved that he didn't die on the ship, because he said, I would be filling out paperwork for the rest of my career if he would have passed away on the ship. It's a sad story, but it's just one of those things. Here we are loading. That's the old Chrisman Ogilvy on the other side. We would have to shift on this dock to load. And you can see what ended my season on the Benson Ford. We were coming into the lay-by dock, which you can see off to the left, where that stream of stones coming down. There's a wall there. We were coming into the lay-by dock, and the captain forgot to call for ballast up forward. We came up to the lake all pumped out, and he came in hot all the time. He was he'd go fast. So we came in, and the bow thruster was started up, and basically all we did was blow leaves onto the dock until he hit the dock, and the bow of the boat rode up on the dock. He slid off, cracked some plates, and we started to leak. So we loaded our cargo, took it back to Dearborn, and that was the end of the Benson Ford in October. They had to take it to the yard. So I was out of work, and I decided to take a semester off to sail to the end of the season. But in a way, this was good because I could go and write for my Oilers ticket. I had enough time. And I went back to the NMU Hall in Detroit, and I got a job with Gulf Oil for the rest of the season. And then next year, I came back as an Oiler on the Henry, so it actually worked out. So I enjoyed my time on the Benson. It was a good crew. Here's the Benson's name board. They took very good care of this name board. They wrapped it up in a bedspread every winter and put it away. There were two of them, one on each side of the wheelhouse. Apparently Benson Ford wanted it at one time, and they said, no, you can't have it. That takes gumption. Here you see the Benson upbound from Dan Corneli's boat, I think, maybe. Yeah, in Lake St. Clair. Looking good as always. Here you see her. Making money. You know. You had time to enjoy the sights. We were coming out of the locks here, going upbound. People had to pay for Sulak's tours. They paid us. Nice. Here we are coming the other way. This is a little rainier day, but it was still nice to go. This is a very early shot of the Henry Ford II at the Eloise dock in Superior. This is a Great Northern ore dock. You can see back then she had a crow's nest on her forward mast, and this, I think, is when she had the light up F up there somewhere. But you can see the superior bumboat was tied alongside her, the Kaner brothers. And I know this shot was built after, this picture was taken after 1934, because that's when they built the Kaner brothers. And that's the boat I bought to become the Cleveland bumboat.
It's still sitting on that Cuyahoga,
It's still in the Cuyahoga.
and it still belongs to you.
Still belongs to me. It's one of those things you get and you can't get rid of.
How big along?
It's 45 feet. And it's riveted. And it's 90 years old this year. I wish it would have been more profitable, but it was an adventure. So here's the Henry loading. And they loaded a lot of these docks with these spouts. And there were like 3 car pockets, 5 car pockets. Each of the ore cars is like 50, 60 tons of back then natural ore, now pellets, iron ore taconite. And you can see they have one side of the hatches open because the chutes would go in and they could basically load the ship without having to open the whole hatch, which made it easier for the deckhand. Here you see coming out through the aerial bridge, the Benson,
In Duluth.
and Duluth with a T. If you're up there, you don't use the H. Here we are coming in through the aerial bridge, the Blatnick Bridge, called the Interstate Bridge, going through Wisconsin Draw off towards Nasabi docks. Back in those days, you knew which docks you were going to by which side of the hatches they opened. They're about to replace that Blatnick Bridge now, I guess. The new one is going to be a little taller because the ships have a hard time clearing it. Here we are coming into the east side of, I think, number 6, P and IR. And we're going to load at the pocket dock. With the pocket dock, they can load you fast, but you have to be able to pump out your ballast. And when I was on the Henry, I was an oiler and I would pump ballast. We had the 2 7,000 gallon per minute pumps for main ballast, and then we had 2 2,500 pound per gallon per minute stripping pumps. It pumped out pretty well. But they could load you faster than you could pump out, so you had to stop loading and then pump for a while. There we go. This is with the spouts in. After they made one run, they would pick the spouts up and then shift. You'd shift 48 ahead. They'd have another set of spouts they could dump in, do another dump, and then you had to check your draft, see where you were, see if they had to put another run or trim, see what you had to do. If you made a mistake, you couldn't get it out. Until you got to the lower lakes, and there are some interesting stories about getting to the lower lakes. It was an interesting way to load because you could load fast if you knew what you were doing. Here we are backing away, headed out. This is a shot of the Henry years ago with her old livery before it had that buff colored stack. And crow's nest is gone, the F is there. And of course she's all painted up and everything's looking just right. This is Duluth. And it's just going through the aerial bridge again on the way out. You can see the Duluth mountain on the side. We'll get there.
Wait till you hear the date of this.
Here you see we're coming out on the Henry, 1972, June 9th. We're coming into Duluth, and I wake up, open my door, and we're in 18 miles of ice, waiting for the icebreaker. June 9th, 1972. 18-mile ice. We're going out in it the next day here. You can see the icebreaker out there waiting for us. But that's Duluth, you know. Here we are going out in June, beautiful June day. It was interesting on the, taking a little roll, you know, this is on the Benson. You can tell the difference between the two because the Henry had bigger lower windows. Oh, those are smaller ones. This is a Benson. The captain of the Benson would not stop for anything. He would take it out and beat on it. He'd go through anything. He was in a lot of large storms, like the storm that sank the Daniel J. Morrell. He was out there. And he went out and just got the tar beat out of him, broke out all the windows in passenger cabins. Lifeboat started coming loose. Chief said, Cap, we're losing the generator bases. We got to do something. So they went back and tied everything down and went back out again. And he didn't gain any time. The Henry was anchored. Henry got there at the same time with no damage. So it'll take a lot more than you want to take, usually. Here we are upbound. Beautiful morning. Here we are coming down. That's another Ford boat we'll talk about in a minute here, Breach, going up. Getting ready to come down to the Blue Water Bridge, Manitoulin coming up. Flying the Bluebird of Happiness. There it is, again. This is the Ford Marine Operations Office at the end of the boat slip. It's built, I believe, in the 50s, early 60s. It was a nice little operation. A nice model in there. All the offices were there, and you were near the ships. It was kind of nice. I believe it's gone now. They built tanks there, did something. Here's the Benson loading in Escanaba at the northwestern dock. You can see the bow thrusters sticking out of the water there because they're loading back aft and they tend to rear up when they do that. The northwestern dock was an excellent dock, no shifting. They put a belt dock in, they could load fast. They were open for much of the year, but it was sold to a railroad who decided they didn't want to run it and they closed it down.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Here you see 1965 Ford LTD. They were admiring the Henry at the Rouge. They were sharing that one hard hat there.
Yeah, that's right. The only guy that batteries over the hard.
Yeah, the other guys can go. You know. I'm surprised that security hasn't gotten to them yet. But it was a nice ad, nice car. So Ford made it very popular or very easy for you to own a Ford. They did not want you to show up in a Plymouth. You couldn't use the company parking lot if you had a foreign car or a Plymouth. They didn't have you park across the road in a mud pit. I had Plymouths, so you know where I parked. But every fall, they had a car corral at the plant, and they had cars there, and you could walk around, and they'd give you a very good deal on them. The officers got better deals, of course. They had a lease. At the end of the lease, you could buy it as a used car. First mate on the Henry bought a Di Tommaso Pantera, which is a good dock car, you know.
Yeah.
You can get home quick, you know. Ford decided in 1953 they needed more tonnage, bigger tonnage. So they built the William Clay Ford. You can see William Clay is the guy on the left underneath laying the keel. And some other high-powered Ford executives, maybe ones that got out of an LTD. And this was built at Great Lakes Engineering Works. She was 647 by 70. She was powered by a steam turbine, which makes me wonder if Henry were around in 1953, what he would have built. I wonder, because those Sun Oxfords, there's nothing wrong with them. Here's Mrs. William Clay christening the William Clay Ford. Here she is laid up in her early Ford livery behind the Henry, or across from the Henry and the Benson. There you see they used to like to nest the boats at the Rouge plant for the winter, and they would run walkways between them. They also had steam heat from the plant, which was nice because they had an electric power for the Ford boats, which were electrically heated, but they could work in comfort all winter. Here's the Clay with her coming into the Sioux with her original colors, including the black letter Ford on the stack. It was later replaced by another one. Trouble with the new one, it shedded all its paint.
Yeah. He wants me to paint the one
I want
hanging
you
in
to
my
paint
boathouse.
it. I want
He
you
keeps
to-
complaining because I
I'll
left
paint
it
it
the way
for
I
you.
found it.
I'll
Yes,
paint
I
it for
know.
you. I have my ABs. I can paint. I can get it all over the house, the yard.
Next time you
boat.
come up, there you go.
Yeah.
We use brooms. Here's with the new paint scheme coming into the MacArthur lock. I kind of like the old paint scheme myself. But Ford Blue sort of took over. They originally were going to paint the whole hull and said everything blue, Ford Corporate Blue, which would have been frightening. You know, that would have been too much. And here's a Jim Morris picture we took at Port Huron. Jimmy and I would go up just for an afternoon, see what we could see, and turns out we saw the clay. So, Ford also found they needed a little more tonnage. They bought the Charles L. Hutchinson from Hutchinson. She was a relatively new ship built in Bay City by Defoe, named her the Ernest R. Breach after the retired chairman of the board. And she was a nice hauler, good sized. However, she developed problems with her bowl gear on her turbine, and they had to do a lot of work on it that they did not expect to do. Mr. Hutchinson made it right. He gave them a good deal on a smaller boat, the McGean, which became the Robert S. McNamara. He sold that boat as 100% A1 perfect, and he stood by his word. Here she is with her Rouge steel markings. Ford redid the steel division and slowly spun it off as Rouge Steel, and then various people operated it, and then it got bought several times, and it went to the Russians, and it came back, and it did this and that. And it's there now. It's owned by another company we'll mention soon. Here's the breech downbound with her Rouge steel markings. Here's the Robert S. McNamara, named after former president of Ford who went to the Defense Department.
His middle name was Strange, by the way. That's what the S stands for.
Property.
Yeah.
He probably wouldn't want you to tell
No,
us.
that's right. He's gone.
So anyway, here they are christening it. It turned out to be a very handy boat. Originally, it went the regular places the other boats did, but then they found it was so handy in the coal trade, they sent it to Toledo all the time. And they converted it to a coal boat by removing the hatches and building a giant hopper about 6 foot tall. It was the only American ship licensed to operate without hatch covers. It would go Toledo, Detroit, and it carried millions of tons of coal. And even with her running, they still had to send the other ships down there. Here she is coming up the Rouge River with her hopper. And of course, they had stripped the after cabins down and primed them because you have to make it look good. It's a Ford boat. There's her triple chime whistle, which she had until the very end. Beautiful ship. I always liked her. Up on the doghouse in the back, they had the extra quarters. You can just see it behind that exhaust stack. There's I think you can see it. There's a little orange thing there. That's the life raft. And the guys used to go up there because there was a nice breeze blowing. One time they went up there and they were sitting on the life raft, and a guy accidentally put his leg through the lanyard, and he got up and moved and he pulled the lanyard.
Oh.
So this is like a 30-man raft, and it started to inflate behind the stack. They were coming back from Toledo, and the guy panicked, and he got his knife out.
Oh no.
And he started stabbing this thing that was growing. And the guy's the pilot house, so this great orange thing growing behind the stack. I think he must have lost his job. I never heard what happened. But it's a mistake you could make very easily. Those things are loaded for bear. They're ready to go. And if you pull that thing, it will inflate, and they're big. They're very big. So maybe somebody ended his sailing career that day. Here she is coming through the Dick Street Bridge. That's the Sensibar up ahead. She's sort of waiting for the Sensibar to go. They couldn't paint the name any larger on the stern. But here she is. After she retired, they took her across the slit and painted her. There she is. She eventually, they were going to make her a dock, but the Corps of Engineers would not let them make her a dock in the Rouge River. So she ended up being towed overseas. I heard she made it. The other ship that went with her sank, but she made it with her open hatches. She was a good little boat. Here she is in all her glory under those giant machines. And one night we were in there unloading late at night. And one of those machines, I see somebody put a Ford house flag at the very top of it. And I didn't have a Ford house flag, so at midnight, I climbed to the top of that machine and got that flag. and I'm still alive. I'd never do it again.
Security good.
See, they don't look up. They never look up. You can do anything you want if you're up in the air. But, yeah. Let's see, here we see John Dykstra. This was the Joseph Wood that Ford got a good deal on, and she was an excellent ship. It's really too bad somebody couldn't have done something with this. It was a nice ship. It was big, but not too big. It would have been a great self-unloader. And she was a good little boat for Ford. She was named after a retired Ford president. What a concept. No Josephine Ford, though. Where was that? You know? It is. So here's the fleet laid up in the winter. Everybody there, fully working, making them ready. There's the B building again, looking out. All that track, all that equipment. You can see how small the McNamara looks like. It's in the foreground there, next to Clay. Clay's the one nearest to the camera. Yeah. This is a Jim Morris photo of the Dykstra in the Rouge River. She was a nice boat, and I don't know how long this would have gone on, but 73 they did the Henry. They made it a self-unloader, and she was one of the first boats with that belt, that incline belt. No buckets for her. She also had a reclaimer, which was quite a thing for coal. I guess it was fairly successful. I don't know how fast it unloaded, but it did pretty well. And they used daylights out of that thing. She was on the coal run because the McNamara was gone. She did coal and everything else. They had to remove some of the passenger cabins out of her to get the belts in. They also put bridge wings on it. You can see how the pilot house is a little wider because they could walk out to the edge without going outside. And she ran quite late, so that was an advantage. As things slowed down for Rouge Steel, the steel division, everything, she's got a lot of outside runs, mainly to salt mines like International Salt in Cleveland. She hauled a lot of salt, which destroyed her. It ate her alive. That salt is so bad. When you see what it did to these ships, you don't want to take your car out in the winter. It's bad. You could see between every trip how much worse it would get. It eats it that fast. And it used her up. But she's still a beautiful looking ship. Here she is in the winter run.
Where was that?
Cleveland.
Cleveland, I'm
That
sorry.
was a Cleveland salt. Yeah, that salt mine has destroyed a lot of ships. But it's kept a lot of people on the roads. Here she is. This, I believe, is a Paul Lamar photo of her stuck off Toledo because they ran her quite late. And she was not an icebreaker because, you know, she only had 3,000 horse, but she was a pretty good little boat. In 1984, they purchased 2 new ships from the Cleveland Cliffs fleet. In fact, Marilyn knows the date, except she told me and I didn't write it down. But there was a black day for Cliffs when the ships went to Ford. They bought the Walter A. Sterling and the Edward B. Green. And they named the Sterling the William Clay Ford, and they named the Green the Benson Ford. It would be the 3rd Benson Ford because they renamed the Dykstra for a short time Benson Ford. And they had self-unloaders now, so they could unload fast, and they didn't have those rigs destroying the cargo hold. These are the old Dykstra on the left, which was the Benson Ford probably at this time, and then painted out. And the Clay on the right, with her name just painted out. They never renamed the old Clay. I believe this is after they took the pilot house off the Clay and put it at Dawson Museum, which was, I guess, something you had to do then.
Oh, no. Dawson Museum
On Bill Isle.
Next
This
picture.
is what it looks like
The next
now.
picture. There it
It's
is.
still there. Then she was taken to scrap. They had lengthened her in 1979 to 767 feet. They put thruster in on the stern. She had stern thruster, bow thruster. Beautiful boat, and then they scrapped her a few years later. Which was, it's a sin, it really is. But anyway, this is Dawson's today with the Clay's pilot house. The old Dykstra was sold to a barge operator whose plans for the barge fell through. But his plans for a cottage did not fall through. So he took the old Dykstra, which is a real Benson Ford of 1924, took it to Cleveland, got the Buckeye booster and a rental crane.
And only one person standing on a ladder doing this.
One person stood there for 2 days taking pictures of that. The first day, I stood there while the rental crane crumbled and the bow fell back onto the hull,
Couldn't lift it.
crooked. The next day, they got a bigger crane, tried again, and this is a successful lift. I'd like to know exactly what the weight of that was, because they actually had hull. They had, a whole story of hull there. They lifted it off, then they moved the hull away, and put it on a barge. This is what it looked like in its heyday, remember. This is how it looks now.
And don't forget to pick that up.
Put it big. And it's a very popular tourist site now when you go by on boats. It's owned by the Casper auto dealers. Boy, I hear the guy wants to talk to me about some pictures, but I don't know why. Let me show you.
And just recently they did this.
They did this limited edition. It's called Ship House Vodka.
So it actually says Benson Ford on it, but here's a picture of it and Ship House. You can imagine that's a play on words on something else, but anyway, so there is the front. And we can pass that around. We can
Weren't
pass
you
that.
going to give them all a little nip?
Pass that around. You can take a look at this on the way out. I sold this tonight already. Somebody was talking me out of it. But it is available from a distillery in Columbus, and it's for sale at Kroger's in Toledo.
Come on, a real landlord.
The liquor shop. So when you take the jet boat out of Port Clinton, you go right past this on the way to Clinton Bay on South Bass Island. And the Casper family owns a Cadillac dealer in Sandusky.
They don't number
things.
dealers. I'm not sure they have a Ford dealer. I don't know.
No, they don't have a Ford
They
dealer.
don't have a Ford dealer? Here's the rest of the Benson. They took it to Raymond's Bend and cut it up. And Mike got to stand next to it and have his picture taken.
Yeah.
It was too bad. And she was still in better shape than the Henry inside.
No salt.
No salt, yeah. The Henry was sold when the rest of the fleet didn't last long with Ford. They sold the fleet off to a division of Interlake Steamship Company. The Clay Ford, the new Clay Ford became the Benson, and the Clay Ford, it's one or the other. The Benson became the K.E. Barker, and the other one, which was the Sterling, that became the Clay, became the
Lecture. And they still pass Grosse Pointe.
And they still go by here every few days to the Rouge plant. However, now the Rouge plant is owned by Cleveland Cliffs, who actually were the original owners of the Sterling and the Green. So, who would have thought? Anyway, they sold this with the fleet. Renamed it Samuel Mather, like 7 or something. And it was never going to run because it was rotten. I think they might have bought it as part of the deal, get it out of here. Now, Old Henry probably would have dragged it up the Rouge and scrapped it and used all the parts around the plant and the conveyor belt if he could. And he would have taken the Dykstra and the clay and done something with them, But what happened? Where was he when he also probably would have taken the original Henry or the Benson, made it into a museum, or at least saved the engine, because it was such an amazing piece of machinery.
There it is.
Here's the Samuel Mather, Henry Ford II. Let's just call it what it is. It's being towed up by a Gaelic tug, and it's going out the last time. I actually think it looks like it's operating, but it's going out, and there it is at the Frog Pond where it sat for a couple of years until they took it over to Port Colborne and scrapped it. Here it is sitting in the winter at the Frog Pond
In Toledo.
in Toledo.
That's what they call
The
it.
fog pond is a place where the unwanted ships go to sit and wait for the animals. They scrapped it, and there's his pilot house.
Should be on the back of my house.
Should be in St. Clair storage, but somehow they cut the boom up in different pieces, possibly for reuse, because you can reuse those and re-engineer them. There's the new clay that is now the Lecture Series with some of the older ones. There it is. This is the Dykstra becoming the short-lived Benson Ford II. There it is. Just somehow doesn't look right. There's the new Benson Ford, the third.
Now the King Barker.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, it was the Benson Ford the third for Ford, and then it became the KD Barker.
What year would that be?
89?
In the 80s.
Yeah, late 80s.
Yeah. This is her before the, this is a rather blurry picture. I don't want you to look at it too much. And here's the Ford Rouge plant at its height, making America strong when industrialism was said to do that. So, anyway, that is it for today.
Questions?
Questions, comments?